Hello, everybody, and welcome to Demiplanar with B. Dave Walters. Today, I have one of my very favorite human beings as our guest. Again, I ask everybody this question at the beginning, but it's slightly disingenuous with you. But for somebody who a time traveler who has just emerged from the year 2007, from a separatist who has been out living in the woods up until now. Who are you, good sir, and where might people know you from?
Totally. My name is Matthew Mercer. I am a voice actor in cartoons, video games, and animation. And me and a bunch of voiceover friends began streaming our D&D game about going on 7 years ago. Oh God. Called Critical Role, and it has been a wild ride ever since. It has led to all sorts of adventures and wonderful friendships. And now we have an animated series that launches in a couple months based on it. So that's kind of the whole shebang.
Exactly. It's like they might recognize you from billboards, around Los Angeles. Every time
So
I see
weird.
one of them, like I almost have a wreck. I'm always like, it's like,
It's the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing.
nope.
So many people come to LA and they're like, one of these days I'll see myself on one of those billboards. I never had that moment, and so when it happened, I was like, this is weird. It's very weird.
But hey, I can tell you, you all have absolutely earned it. So on behalf of all the rest of us on the other side of that equation, thank you for everything you all have done, everything you've done personally. I go out of my way to gas you up, but I'm not going to embarrass you here in front of the internet. But I'm just you guys, the work you've done and the contribution you've made to people's lives, not just in general, but especially during now being in the darkest timeline, cannot be overestimated, man. So thank you personally. Thank the whole team. You
Oh
know,
man, that that goes both ways. Honestly, like we, none of us knew any of this would continue to grow into this wonderful community and space where people have the opportunity to tell stories through gaming the way that we do. And it's just seeing that sort of permission continue to grow and flourish, and more amazing people come and elevate it, every year. There is a proud papa aspect to it, and also just thankful that we get to do what we do.
if you told me probably 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago, that not only would it be possible to do what we do for a living, but that I'd get to do it, I wouldn't have believed it. Because again, I came up in a time, that not only was it weird, it was actually evil and bad. And
Hmm.
then it became weird. You know what I mean? And then it became cool. I was like,
And
oh,
yeah, and now
okay.
you're doing it on television there, buddy.
I'm just, I will say at Comic-Con this weekend, I was like introduced. I'm TV's B. Dave Walters. That's an accurate statement now. Uh,
Yep.
but I'm like, none of this Uno reverse gassing up on me, though. I'm loving on you. You stop it. But one thing before we dive into this properly is the new Lambert House Pride shirts are out. There you go. Been out the new Magic the Gathering D&D shirts. It's mtg.com/pride. I think I posted the link to it. Whatever your politics are, whatever you think, I think we can all agree that there should not be homeless, suicidal children because of just who and what they are. And Lambert House makes a really meaningful difference. It is very near and dear to my heart. I've got like 4 years worth of the shirts. I flexed them all, so here's the new one. So there you go. They're out now. I usually like to start these talks. Well, before I dive in properly, we already got questions coming in. This is a first, by the way. Even before I ask for questions are coming in. But if you have a question for Matt, for me, put it in chat. Just put the word question in all caps in front of it so the mods can capture it. They're putting them here on the sheet for me. I'll get to them as soon as I can. Again, a lot of these I already see, y'all. We can't answer. Anytime you're like, ooh, is this going to happen on the show? We're not going to tell you. We're just not. So, if feel free to ask, but if we don't answer, that's why I usually like to start with a little philosophical softball here,
Totally.
just to kick it to you. Uh, my question for you has two parts. Why do we tell stories, and what makes a good one?
Oh boy. out of the gate.
You know what I mean? Just like, no, it's an underhanded toss.
Yeah,
You know?
totally. I think for me, and I can only really speak from my perspective because I can't speak for humanity and its history necessarily, but I think we tell stories as a device for connection and compassion, and a way to create a shared experience, whether that be retelling a story of someone's experience and thus other people listening can connect more with the person who's telling it, or by telling a fictional story in which everyone can experience the tale together and as such share that space of imagination. And going into just television and film, it's still creating a shared experience that brings everyone a little closer together. So it's from we were telling stories around a burning fire in a forest somewhere thousands of years ago to now us rolling dice and being nerds on the internet. It's an important place for people to set aside their daily clouded mind, their politics, and just kind of like experience and tell a story together. And in that place, find commonality, find a communal joy that just kind of just brings us all a little closer together. As far as what makes a good story, I mean, there are college courses that break that down. More than anything, as a storyteller, it's being genuine in the intent of telling your story and sticking to your guns. I say that because so much of modern media is obsessed with the idea of twists and surprising the audience. And there are many great stories that were going in a great direction, but when the community began to discover what the big plot reveal was going to be, they just pivoted hard to keep it a surprise, and in doing so ended up kind of hobbling their narrative. I think what makes a good story is having an intended theme, an intended idea of where the impact you want this to have, and sticking to it regardless. Why wouldn't you want to reward the cleverness of people who are invested in your story if they figure it out? Just because it's not a surprise doesn't mean it's not enjoyable or rewarding. And for those who didn't figure it out, it's both. So that's off the top of my head, a big facet of it. This could be a whole conversation on that answer. So I'll stick with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like this hasn't been discussed for like 3,000 years, but, but hey, I feel like that's still very much like leaned in on it. For people that have, tuned into the show before or listened to me rant about this, because one thing about me is I love talking about the things I love doing as much as I love doing those things. And for my money, storytelling is what makes humans human. It is what has made us the dominant species on the planet. And I mean, in the fullness of time, when we truly understand what, crows and elephants and whales are saying to each other, they very well may be telling stories as well. But the fact that we can sit around the fireplace and share something that connects us, just like what you were just saying, but that we can take actionable insight about life from, that Odysseus sailing between Scylla and Charybdis, we've got our own metaphorical Scyllas and Charybdises. What's the plural of I don't know. There's only one Charybdis,
Yes.
But yeah, and be able to, take meaningful knowledge that now we don't have to experience because it has now been imparted to me in such a way, I think is what makes us us. And it's not a coincidence that the kids that grew up reading Jules Verne talking about going to the moon took us to the moon. Now the kids that grew up watching Star Trek with replicators and data pads made replicators and data pads. It's the world that is envisioned through these stories, then manifests afterwards, which I think that's why I take storytelling so seriously, in the meaning and the impact it can have. In your experience as an actor, how if at all, does it inform your tabletop storytelling? Because oftentimes, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, you're given the lines, but it's kind of up to you to bring that to life and make this, a living, breathing person, you know. So
It's interesting. My initial forays into acting back in the old days were inspired by my experiences at the tabletop. I had the opposite entry point where I never thought about acting. I never felt comfortable publicly jumping into the shoes of another character necessarily until I had rolled the dice with some friends and found that was something that was natural to me and something I wanted to explore. And so through acting, I learned a comfort in that sort of bold decision making, to just make a strong choice and go with it and see where it takes you. I think general culture, especially American culture, tends to instill you with a fear of failure. Mm-hmm. And so people are less likely to take a bold choice for fear of looking like a fool or fear of being the wrong choice. In training as an actor, you learn that through that failure, there are lessons to be had, and that not every incorrect choice is a bad choice. Sometimes it's just part of the process of honing yourself as a performer, your comfort in making those decisions and changing your perspective on the moment, even on text that you've memorized and performed hundreds of times. You could see two different stage shows months apart with the same actors and get two very different tales, because maybe the performers have learned a different way they want to exhibit that story and different emphasis on interactions and story beats. So for me, my training as an actor just kind of gave me a very strong permission to embrace the unknown, to embrace the bold choice in the moment and see where it takes you, as well as just the skills to feel comfortable living in the skin and perspective of someone that is not myself. And that helped me, just like tabletop did, it helped me become who I wanted to be. There's so much of that kind of introverted, quiet nerd kid that learned to be comfortable speaking to people, be comfortable public speaking, to really kind of find the people that made me happy and I wanted to make happy, and kind of forge the type of friend circles that I wanted to through tabletop gaming and through acting, kind of together creating who I was to eventually become this weird nerd amalgam.
And also, we're all fans of that weird nerd amalgam, for the record. It's interesting you say that, because somebody asked me after we did the first invitation to party, and was like, how are you so quick on your feet? How do you just respond to everything so fast? And I was like, because I'm not afraid to make a mistake. I'm not afraid to just completely fall flat and mess something up, because either I'll roll with it or I'll laugh it off and we'll keep going. And it just so happens in the very first episode when we went up, the teleprompters didn't work. Like, we'd rehearse so many times, it was always fine, and they were like 30 seconds, and I'm like, teleprompters blank, and they were like 10 seconds, I'm like, teleprompters blank, and they counted it in, and I was like, well, here we go. And I was like, we'll do it live. And it just so happens that studio we're in is the exact studio of Bill O'Reilly's We'll Do It Live rant.
No way!
Physically the same space. So there's just like a teleprompter goblin in there, that just messes with it.
No joke.
Yeah. But, it's like, well, hey, something's about to happen. Let's go. Let's just see, because there is no failure, there's only feedback. And I must just say, just as a performer tip for all of y'all, giving speeches, anything like that, if you make a mistake, keep rolling. The audience doesn't know unless you tell them something's wrong, just keep at it. Although you said something that triggered interesting thought there. If the goal, or at least the original vision, was not acting, what did you think you were going to do? What did little Matthew aspire towards?
I was aspiring to be an animator, actually. I'd spent a large part of my young life as an artist, and had many sketchbooks with me at any given point in time. And I was studying a lot about 2D and 3D animation. I was going to go to CalArts for animation, and then realized at the last minute I'm glad things worked out the way they did, but at the time my sense of the quality of my art was very dismal compared to other professionals and the people in my field at the same age. And so I did not want to put myself into a position of owing a lot of money in student loans and putting my family into further debt for something that I was not fully behind at the time. So that was kind of where the animation dream died, but I've lived vicariously through all the amazing artists and animators in our community. And that's part of an additional layer of joy, is getting to see all these amazing people create things that I could never dream of doing.
You make a very interesting point there. That, I'm always, you can do it, don't give up, all these things. But part of the thing that I think a lot of times people overlook is the life path that the universe is calling you towards. It may call you north because of some of the people and experiences you're going to encounter on the trip that may ultimately take you east, but it was necessary to head north. How do you make the decision between, when you should just keep your head down and just keep working and, your day will come, versus kind of admitting to yourself that maybe this isn't the play, maybe I need to do something else?
I mean, that's relative to each person's life experience. For me personally, it's hard to pinpoint, because there've been multiple times in my life that I've essentially hard shifted from a career goal. After the animation future didn't work out, I got a day job as a game tester for video games, which people go like, "Oh, that sounds amazing. You play video games for a living." Anybody who's worked in QA will understand that it's not like that. Very, very meager pay, especially out of the gate for, 70, 80-hour weeks playing, at the time, Land Before Time Great Valley Racing Adventure for the PlayStation 1. That gets to you over time. But that moved into a career path in production for video games and on the dev side of things. And I worked for some great companies on, God of War 1 and 2 over at Sony Santa Monica Studio. I worked with Infinity Ward on the Call of Duty 2 and the first Modern Warfare. But over time began to realize that in that space, you reach that point where you're like, do I want to make this a career? Mm-hmm. Or do I have lingering things I want to aspire? I'm a person who believes in at least trying something and not being afraid to fail. And I'd rather fail at it than never do it. In fact, I hope that either in the slight chance I do succeed in that path, that would be great. But I would rather go forward without the regret of having not tried. That question, that lingering, what if I did do that? What if I did take that risky step?
Yeah, I've run into a lot of times with people when they deal with the fear of failure, that's like, I don't want to try because I don't want to fail. And it's kind of like, yeah, but by not trying, you already didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, you've gained literally nothing. Like, I mean, you do not have that thing. Like, you possibly could have had the thing, or, again, develop something else somewhere along the way or whatever, versus just standing still. It's like, always swing at it, man. Swing at it. Sure. Because you never know, it's when along the way did you decide that you wanted to pursue being a full-time creative? Because presumably while you were walking that path, some of these other things were kind of coming up in parallel. So
I'd always had a love of voiceover because I was a huge nerd, and I was in that time where anime had really kind of hit the mainstream. I grew up with anime in the background, trading VHS tapes, which for those who don't know, those are an old school means of video distribution.
That's how it was.
Turn to ash in front of you right now.
Back in my day,
exactly.
Fist of the North Star and Vampire Hunter D on a single cassette.
Exactly. Yeah. I had to watch it in Dragon Ball Z in Japanese with Korean subtitles. My friend got at the local imported Korean video store.
This is all true.
Yeah. But I don't know. For me, I was uncomfortable on camera, so I love the idea of still being able to perform for animation, which I grew up loving. And when I realized that was a career path, it was something that seemed so impossible that when the opportunities arose to even shoot for it, it was something I wanted to kind of push for slowly over time. And so I had little opportunities when I began to try and reach out to connect with the right people and continue to hone my craft as a performer. Over time, I reached a point where I had saved enough money working in the video game industry and had just enough of a taste of small opportunities that I was like, okay, I want to take this full hog. I want to give it my all for a couple years, and if that shows that it's not going to work out, then I can move forward to the next venture comfortably, knowing that I gave it a shot and I don't have to look back with regret. And so I quit my at that point still growing career and downsized my whole lifestyle dramatically for an extended period of time. And that was when I decided to go full creative if I could. Mm-hmm. And I always felt like at least I had some creative in my life because I loved playing role-playing games. That was my outlet. That was my real creative hobby, where no matter what sort of, inane career I was having to do to subsist, to live in this capitalistic hellscape, I always had role-playing games with my friends as a way to create something that was meaningful to me and to my friendships around me. And so I had no idea I could turn that into a career for a long time, because like you said before, there wasn't really a path to that unless you were creating the games themselves. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that for me was the major point where I decided to go full creative, with the very firm belief that it probably was going to fail, but at least give it a shot for a bit and then move forward without regret if it does.
That's all you can do. We have tons of questions that have come in already. I sort of like looked away for a second and I look back and then I'm like, oh, scroll.
Oh boy.
So I'm gonna ask you a few of these. I have one quick thing I'm gonna poke you there here in our side chat here. Quick check in there. And then let me pose one of these to you here. This is from a dear friend of mine, Murphy Pop Art. Shout out to Megan. What's a game moment that made you realize the power of storytelling with others?
I think there was for me, I was running a 3.5 Ravenloft game, the Expedition to Castle Ravenloft, for a bunch of my friends. And we'd had like emotional moments in the past, but there was an element to this campaign, because it was so dark and the people that were playing with me were on board to really kind of, not unspokenly so, kind of really live in the tragedy and the heroic rise from that tragedy. Mm-hmm. And as we went through the game, there were moments where characters, suffered, because that's kind of the experience of Ravenloft, and what crafts these heroes is struggle. And through some of these improvised stories, the players were letting themselves go to these dark places, and of course we're checking in with each other to make sure it's cool, and then watching loss at the table, watching and accepting the loss, and not like in a frustrated player, that's bullshit in a way, but just like allowing the loss of a member of their party wash over them, and the tears at the table begin to flow, and the player, as they died, kind of them letting go and watching the smile across their face as they see the impact it had on everybody else at that table, and delving into the aftermath of that and how each player character kind of processed the loss, layered with the player processing the loss. And then when we finished the session, it was like an Irish wake. Like, let's pour some drinks. Let's laugh about how amazing this moment unexpectedly was for all of us. And in a weird way, for some of the players that were processing their own grief for real world circumstances unrelated to the game, it also for them was a very cathartic moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that unexpected session and everything that surrounded it kind of really was the first time it crystallized in my mind how important these experiences can be as a human being, let alone a group of friends bonding. So yeah, that was kind of the first real moment it hit me.
I think for me, it was the World of Darkness games that I ran for my Patreon. Cause, about 18 months, we were like 35, 40 games a month at one point. So it was a lot of flight time. and what I realized, I have found this consistently to be true with the World of Darkness. The barrier of entry is so much lower because it's this world. It's that gas station is on the corner. That movie theater's over there. It just so happens 30% of the population are monsters. You know, with D&D, you very much can get to those places, but it's almost like there's more filters in the sense that it's like
Yeah.
I got to keep track of what an elf is, what a paladin is, you know, where Neverwinter is. Okay, that's Lolth is bad. I got it, you know, and you can become steeped in it and get to those places. But with vampire, in the world of darkness in general, it's so accessible. And what I found was I saw again and again and again new players oftentimes their characters' flaws were their flaws in a way that they would often be unconscious of. This also happened to me too, by the way. And as their character worked through some of these things, the person was working through those things. And as the character changed, the person changed. And I got so many messages and things that were like, this helped me so much because, you know, I didn't know that I needed to forgive my father, you know, or I didn't know why I was this like unrepentant people pleaser or any of those things. And just getting to see, you know, real human healing happen in the context of what overtly should be a horror game. And I think it's not unrelated that you and I both kind of had these initial experiences in the horror setting because horror is so intimate and you have to be so trusting.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I've already sat down at the table to get put through the ringer. You know what I mean? Like, I consented to that when I put my quarter up, you know, on the game case, you know, and then you can, you know, you go down that road. And when we did a Wraith 4-part game, and, you know, it was heavy and intense and just brutal and they were just awful to each other. Because for people who aren't familiar with Wraith, you play 2 characters. You've got yourself and you have your shadow. And your shadow is everything you're not proud of. Every lie you ever told, every insecurity you've got, it's your shadow. And it's not your evil twin, it's actually you. And when you're at the table, you play your character in someone else's shadow. And they just beat the hell out of each other, man. They just went in. And you'd get to the end of these episodes that were objectively awful. But everybody just felt so light afterwards. And it was such an odd disconnect, you know? And it was that catharsis, just like you were saying, you know, being able to just let it out. Cypher a tier, Tanya's in chat. What's happening, Tanya? Hello, what's happening, Tanya? I did pass along your hello. I said I would, and I did. If Matt, if you could play an evil character, what class and race and why? And apparently we have another evil character question here that I don't see. So, but there's we'll just leave it at that until I see the other one.
Oh man, I mean, there is a like an equal joy and discomfort of playing an evil character. As a performer, I relish in the opportunity to play something that is so different from my values, both as an example is to remind me why my values are the way they are. But I think if I were to play in the terms of like 5th edition D&D, I love the classic idea of a fallen paladin, like a lawful evil fallen paladin. I love the idea of somebody who has fallen from grace, and lawful evil to me is such a fascinating thing because there is still a very strong sense of a code of a dark side of the moral, you know, a hard edge, and there is an honor in a weird way to it that I think is a fascinating tightrope walk as a player, especially if you're the only evil character in a group or in a group of fully of evil characters. It's, I don't know, to me that's a very, very fun performing challenge that I would love to dive into someday, maybe.
Shout out to Arthas Manethil, our homie who ain't here.
There you go. There you go.
That archetype is my favorite. Arthas Manethil, Anakin Skywalker, the hero who gets lost with the best of intentions, you know, that was trying to do right the whole time, you know.
Let's be honest, there's a lot of villains like that in the real world.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. The other question was also from another homie. Hello, Prince of Bards. Was what inspiration do you both draw on for villains?
I mean, often real world historical examples. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there are new villain archetypes that I learn as the years go on, and technology and social media continues to expose us to new types of villainous
Mm-hmm.
personas. And I have taken notes on certain documentaries, been like, this is such an odd, weird, terrible human being that I want to incorporate as a villain in my campaign. I have little like notes in my notepad about it. So yeah, I draw inspiration from real life. That's my point.
I think the most important thing to remember when designing villains is villains are the heroes of their story. Uh, in so the things that they're doing and are trying to do should make sense from their point of view, and the more it makes sense from their point of view, the more compelling it is. Like characters like Killmonger, Magneto, they make a lot of sense, man. They make a lot of sense. You're like, I'm not supposed to agree with you, and yet, um, and yet, and I think I uh I watched an interview with Anthony Hopkins, and somebody asked him about being villains, and or was it Malcolm McDowell? I think it was Malcolm McDowell, and he was playing Titus Andronicus, and he was
Mm.
having a lot of trouble with it. And the advice the director gave him was like, "Yes, you're terrible, but have a good time with it, because he's having a good time about it. He is unrepentant, and so you should be." And it's like, well, okay. Yeah. Like, I'm going to be playing Tiamat tonight in the finale of Idle Champions Presents, and Tiamat's having a great time
Mhm.
being Tiamat. So,
Yep.
yeah.
And to that point too, like, for every villain, you're like, this villain, I can understand where they're coming from, or there is kind of an empathic idea, and very much in mainstream media, an idea, a strong just wave of the villain that you can understand. That is an important archetype and is interesting. But sometimes people are just monsters too. Sometimes they're
Exactly.
just evil, evil people.
I do agree with you. In fact, I actually somewhat don't like this wave of here's why you should empathize with them. It's like, no, Hannibal's just eating people. No,
Yeah.
like, and that's we cannot be okay with that. That's all right. Speaking of eating people, this was the very first question here. Quick on the draw from the anxious DM. What's your favorite snack to eat while playing?
Ooh, good
People.
question.
That's my favorite snack. Yeah, right.
There we go. Long pork. I will honestly gummies. I'm a big fan of gummies. They're quick, they're easy, they're right there. A little sugar rush. That's kind of my go-to pre and during game snack. Uh, Beyond that, it sounds so hackneyed, but just like Doritos.
Yeah, man. I mean, hey, it's gamer fuel, bro.
Right?
I don't eat much when I'm playing because I eat like a toddler. Like, I make a lot of
Mm.
noise. I make a big mess. But yeah, those gummies, Doritos, just the basics. Um, if so, here's you have a deep interest in science. How do you incorporate that into your world and make it digestible, clear to the players? There's a bunch of just world building ish questions. So let's just kind of loop all that in together. Getting across science. Let's just talk a little bit about world building, the process that goes into it, because this will save us about 12 questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who's building their world for their home game, you want to build it and build themes and ideas that are dear to your heart. Not everything has to be focused in science if you don't have an interest in various aspects of astro or quantum physics. But find things that you're passionate about that you do know a lot about, and see how you can incorporate elements of that into your world, and in doing so, kind of be able to convey part of that passion to your players, because that's going to be an easy cornerstone for you to begin your world building, and then you can expand into things from there that maybe you aren't as familiar with, and from there it's research. From there, I did not have a long history of understanding all the different multitudes of government through history, the different types of monarchies, and all the different ways that societies eventually build a form of government. But you have to kind of have a vague idea if you're going to build a world that has any sort of political elements to it. And so that then goes into late night Wikipedia deep dives and watching digestible videos on YouTube that people explain the historical aspects there. So utilizing the internet is a great way to learn things that you don't have a lot of knowledge or experience with. It's all out there for you. For me, incorporating science just comes from specifically to our second campaign, really more than anything. I've grown up with a deep love, though nowhere near a mastery of quantum physics, astrophysics. Incorporating a lot of Stephen Hawking, a lot of just the idea of the fabric of our universe and the great mysteries of why and how. And so I wanted to bring a little bit of that into a world of magic and swords and sorcery. And for me, it was just finding that middle ground where I could incorporate themes of that, where I could incorporate elements of that mystery that brings a scientific flair, but it doesn't feel like it's butting against the tried and true genre of magic and elves and monsters. So it just took a little time to sit with it. And I did sit with it for a while. It was partially over my honeymoon, just kind of brainstorming, and then sitting at my computer and thinking about what would be a really interesting way of taking some of these themes and introducing it slowly over the course of a campaign so my players don't feel entirely lost. If you introduce a facet of your home game and then throw down a packet for them to do their homework on, your players might start playing at another table.
That's why I keep saying, I'm like, nobody cares about your 5,000 year back history. Like you can have it in your noodle, but for 1,000 generations, the Jedi were the peacekeepers of the old Republic. That's it. That's what you need to know. Everything else will be emergent and also immersive, hopefully. That if you were going to find out about this, multi-headed succession, plot, it should be because you find the people that are all involved in it and figure out what's going on, not be like, let me sit here and talk to you for 20 minutes, about why this is important.
Yeah. And to go off that too, like, I think world building can easily become an overwhelming theme when you feel like you need to create everything. I highly recommend loosely plotting out themes and ideas and then fleshing them out as the players show interest in pulling on those threads. Dunamancy, and what I was just talking about as a kind of an esoteric science-based magic force, I would never have gone into as much detail with if players like Liam didn't continue to tug on that thread and be curious and want to know more about it, in which case I felt more comfortable fleshing it out further and expressing it more in the campaign. But just because it's your passion, to what V-Day was saying, doesn't mean you want to force it down the throats of all your players. You can loosely introduce parts of it, and if the players go, ooh, that's cool, let's dive a little further into that, then you can flesh it out further. You can be like, it's a kingdom. And if they're like, well, what court lays the law? Then you can be like, oh, well, I can now tell you more detail about the politics. And if they're like, I don't trust these politics, I want to go ahead and see who is being crushed under boot by those in power, then you're like, okay, the players seem to be interested in a political campaign. Now I can really flesh out the politics, and I know they won't feel, forced and pigeonholed into the story you're trying to tell. Instead, you're creating a story based around your mutual interest in where it's going.
Yeah, and I think you also always have to ask yourself is, what's the theme of the game? What's the theme of the world? Like, what's the point you're trying to make about this place? I mean, is it a good place? Is it a bad place? Is it, a neutral tapestry upon which all sorts of designs are scrawled? I always give people the example. It's like the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek. And this got muddied a little in recent years, and I think that's kind of why people were kind of lukewarm about it. Is Star Trek is a fundamentally good universe. The best and brightest of these alien species have made peace. They're out exploring things. They're having a good time. Things go wrong. They fix those things, and then they go back to having a good time. Star Wars is a dark and scummy universe where evil has won. Evil is always on the ascent. Good is always on its heels. If good wins, it is temporary, and it is a candlelight against the darkness, against this oncoming push of negativity that we must fight back against. Sorry, Ravenloft again is Ravenloft's a bad place. Ravenloft is essentially a series of prisons in Twilight Zone's monkey paw-esque, predicaments to find yourself in and hopefully escape. Whereas the Forgotten Realms, high fantasy adventure, you're a hero. Problems have solutions, and you go out and you solve them, you know? So what statement you're trying to make with your world will also inform a lot of those other things too.
Hell yeah.
There's several what recommendations do you have for new DMs type thing. So let's detour slightly into, somebody who is, they've seen what you do, they've seen what I do. They're like, I want to get into this Dungeons and Additionally Dragons that the kids are on about, what do you think? At the risk of oversimplifying something that we could easily talk for hours about, let's just say if you could give 3 pointers to the person who's never done it. We'll assume this person has played twice, never run a game. So at least they have a baseline competency with the vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
If you could give 3 points.
One thing, preparation for your game is meant to give you comfort to throw it away during the game. Many people prefer not to prepare at all and just wing it. Some people like to prepare a crap ton of stuff because it gives them a comfort when they're at the table. Preparation is not what you're supposed to be playing through necessarily. You don't want to railroad your players, but it's enough details in the world and possibilities so that when you do get there and the players are diving in, you can feel comfortable falling back on some of those familiar elements that you kind of created in your head and then follow the narrative from there. So part of the experience of DMing and GMing over time is learning how much preparation is comfortable for you. And that is relative to each person who runs a game. Find within your first few games how much preparation works for you and understand that preparation is just for your own comfort. Secondly, to that point as well, part of that preparation, based on your comfort in creating characters on the fly, developing NPCs, factions, mysteries on just like flashcards are a very, very easy thing to have at your disposal. I've been at games where people who are newer GMs are asked by a player to suddenly go to the nearby stables, and they're like, I didn't have any stables prepared, and they start getting nervous and start floundering and frustrated. So just having cards with the names on them or creating a handful of NPCs with some loose details that can be tailored really to any position in the world at hand is a really, really good resource. So when you have to think on your feet and you don't in the moment feel comfortable creating something, you can grab your previously prepared notes and then tailor them to what's needed in the moment to move forward. That helps keep the game flow going. And it helps you, once again, learn how much prep is comfortable for you in the games you want to run. 3, I mean, this seems, especially in modern times, standard, but I can't emphasize it enough for new players or new DMs. Have a conversation with your players about the themes, comfort, lines and veils. Have that session 0 conversation to make sure that everyone knows what you're in for. Many times that I see stories about people that join game groups and then walk away really frustrated that it wasn't what they wanted, or conversely, it was a toxic table, is because there was no initial conversation about expectations of the game, about what people enjoy and want out of that gaming session. Are they more of a tactical combat based, kick in doors, kill monsters, get loot, get experience, Diablo-esque type game style, which is a totally valid and awesome game that I enjoy. But if you're expecting a deep emotional, narrative, you're going to walk away very disappointed. And conversely, the DM needs to know what types of things the players are excited about so they can work to incorporate them into the games along with what they're excited to play and exhibit with. And that's the other thing too. As a GM, you're a player as much as everyone else. You should not sacrifice what your joy is for what the players are expecting. And that's part of the weird process of finding a good table, is when all the players together, including yourself, can go, all right, cool. These are the themes I'm thinking. Cool. You want a little bit of intrigue. You want a little bit of, fight epic monsters. You want a little bit of mystery noir. Okay, cool. I can think of a way to incorporate these themes in a way that I'm excited about. Now you can go into your session 1 knowing exactly, confidently, that what your players want, and that you can start bringing it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I 1,000% agree with all of that. Of course, I think for me, I very carefully plan out the beginning. I know what I'm going to say right at the beginning, and then I have an idea of where it should be roughly by the half, and an idea of roughly where I want it to end. But I never plan the second half of it because no plan survives contact with the enemy. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
the dice and the characters will surprise and often betray you. And it'll be yes and just see where it goes. Because I think for me, my three things would be, remember it is a collaborative art, like you just said. That a trick that I use a lot. And I always recommend other people do that massively increases engagement is you say like, hey, you tell me what this looks like. You walk into a room, it's terrible, tell me what it looks like. And then give them a chance to describe it. You've defeated the villain, the monster is, tell me how you strike down the monster. Because it one takes the weight off the DM and increases the engagement of everybody at the table, which is always good. Much has been made of the quote unquote Matt Mercer effect, which I know you don't like, and it's no fault of your own. And I hear that a lot. It's like, well, I can't do what Mercer does. You can't do what I do. I can't do what Jasmine or Bria do. And I'm like, hey, guess what? You really can't. You really can't. But we can't do what you do. We can't tell your stories. So the song that is in your heart must be sung, the adventure that you want to put out to the world, that the world very much needs right now in the darkest timeline. Only you can tell, which is to my third point, is just do it. If you're thinking about doing it, do it. Get your friends together, roll some dice, have some fun, and hone your craft over time. But the most important thing is that you're just enjoying it, and don't overthink it, because none of us started like this. I've been playing this game since I was 13 years old. I feel like you've been at it a while as well.
Not the same. 14 when I first started playing.
It's all right around there. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
unless you have a parent that like got you into it when you were like 8, like a parent or older sibling, like that 13-ish is, junior high-ish, seems to be like the gateway time for most of us. But yeah, just do it. Get your friends together and do it. And I guess a bonus one is the rules exist to facilitate the story, not the other way around. So don't worry about not having just this encyclopedic knowledge of it committed to memory, because you check the book during games, I check the book during games, because I got 5 editions of this game floating around in my head, along with various other games that you're like, Magic Missiles in a lot of games,
Yeah.
So every once in a while you'll be like, wait, how's it? Got it.
I'll riff off that one for a quick one too.
Mm-hmm.
Fun over rules is kind of a thing that occasionally comes up, where it's, you try and stick to the rules because the rules are there to facilitate the story.
Mm-hmm.
But if the players are like, I want to do this cool thing, and it's not beyond the realm of possibility, but there isn't a rule for it, or the rule might not allow them to do that, think to yourself, what, is it more fun to let it happen for everyone at the table? Then why not? And create a rule for it. It's as easy as beat this number on your dice.
Let's let fate decide. Yep, roll it. Let's see. Roll it. Let's see. Oh.
Yeah, if your players are fighting a roper and they like, I want to try and cut off one of the tendrils. There's no real rules for a lot of monsters to how to attack and cut off part of its limbs. Doesn't mean they can't do it. Does it sound fun if they try? Sure, why not? That arm has 10 hit points with an AC of 12. Roll and see if you can take it off. You do, cool. Now I'll reduce its attacks by, -2 for the rest of the combat, and whoever it had ensnared is free. That wasn't specifically in the rules, but was it fun? And do all the players remember it, including yourself? Hell yeah. So why not?
Yep. You're like, here we are now. Absolutely. This is one from Rom, friend of mine, went to high school with this guy and his brother. Cool. Given the well-earned and hard-fought success of CR and both the broadness of entertainment and the TTRPG streaming niche within it, do you see CR as a big fish in a small pond or a little fish in a big pond? Neither, both, or something else?
Weirdly, I think of CR as just a fish in its own weird pond, I guess. I'm not, how do I put it? in the scope of entertainment, it's very much a small fish in a big pond. But that I like it that way. Otherwise, there's too much pressure in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
In the tabletop space, because of how long we've been around and kind of rose over the years to where it is, it's hard to ignore. It can be the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room. But I'm also not a fan of comparing it to the space either, because so many people are doing so many different things. I don't know. I'm a firm believer in the high tide raises all ships
Mm-hmm.
type circumstance. So fish in a pond is a metaphor that's difficult for me to tailor to it.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of it as
You're a pond in a pond. You're a pond.
Yeah,
in a lake.
there you go, a pond in a lake. Or consider it it's the heavy stone in the pond that causes the water level to rise.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put it there.
I mean, hey, speaking as somebody that surfs those waves, this is an accurate statement. Let me ask you again. So many questions. Wow, so many questions. Thank you all for all of your questions. I apologize we can't get to all of them. I'm trying to loop in as many conceptual ones as I can as we go along here. I know you are a mental health advocate, about things. What do you think? Because last week I had Dr. Well, I guess last week was Mark Helms. Week before that was Dr. Janina Scarlett, who's a wonderful human being. If you didn't see that episode, you should watch Dr. Scarlett. Follow her at Shadow Quill on Twitter. What do you think is the mental health value? And I'm gonna split this question into two parts, because again, this is another one we could talk about for an hour. Of both the mental health benefits of both as a player, as a participant, because I'll say both player and DM, but participating in these games, but also in the being a part of the fandom, in the belonging of taking the journey along with these people.
Oh, that's a great question. For the first part, I think when you have found a group of players and friends that you find comfort and trust enough to kind of explore things that might be close to your own struggles, to try and maybe work through some catharsis to your own challenges in life, that can be an incredibly rewarding experience. But even outside of specific circumstances like that, there is a kinship and a shared joy in experiencing these things with other human beings face to face, whether it be in person or on video chat online, that it is a very, very healthy part of being a person that we don't get to experience enough. I think play is such an important part of finding joy as a human being. And culturally, for so long, we are told to shut it out, to squash the play, that to play video games, to play role-playing games, to play hopscotch at the park. These things are considered child activities, and eventually you outgrow them. I think that is inherently false and extremely unhealthy. And what these tabletop games allow is this very safe space to play as an adult, permission to just immerse yourself in imagination with people that you trust to do the same. And that not only brings a kinship and a closeness with these people at the table, with these shared experiences, but that is exhibiting and utilizing and exercising the muscle that is your imagination that can only help to benefit other parts of your life. I firmly believe that. And there is actual studies to back it up. As far as community goes, I think there is incredible benefits in engaging with community. You have to engage with a mindset of understanding that the internet has toxicity. And any community, big or large, has toxic elements. And so learning how to identify and often just not engage will overall help your experience with these places. And I look in some of like the CR spaces and just tabletop spaces in general, where so much positivity, so much support, so much joy, and so much kind of shared communal goodness happens on a daily basis, and that keeps me going when I'm in my darkest hours. Um, but also, and I see things people mention like all these spaces, these tabletop spaces are so toxic. The CR community is so toxic. They're not wrong about those facets, maybe, but those are easily can be misconstrued as the overall community when it is really definitively not. It is a very minuscule percentage of very loud people. And being able to disengage from that, being able to find the spaces where there is safety and joy is so rewarding. And there are so many wonderful people still finding these spaces, and these communities continue to grow based around live plays, based around just games themselves, just based around the art in these spaces that happen. And social media doesn't make it easy sometimes, as algorithms reward hot takes and negativity. So one, knowing when to disengage when things don't seem to be going in a positive way and just step away for a bit. And two, finding the good spaces and sticking to them. There's a lot of really, really, really wonderful opportunities to feel like you belong, to find like-minded friends, and overall just kind of improve your mental health. But it's important to know that line.
I completely agree, and I would submit that that's the nature of haters. Period. Is they're always a small but vocal minority. I mean, the overwhelming majority of participants in this community, these communities, arguably of the entire human race, are largely good people with a small number of very vocal jerks, that get a disproportionate amount of attention in things at times, that oftentimes can get, I think, a little more attention than it should, because ultimately to me, fandom is about belonging and, feeling like you're a part of something, which, believe it or not, we're almost at time. So I'm going to pose one last question for you here.
All right.
Because, again, I started off, I mentioned Lambert House. We've talked about, fandom and belonging and all of those things. I want to give you a chance because obviously, I know how tremendously humble you are. Like, you guys cannot see, like, the massively effusive text messages I send him all the time. Because I know you don't say these things to yourself, so I have to big you up on behalf of everyone else.
B. Dave is the sweetest, by the way. If you haven't had a chance, he's one of the greatest human beings.
Stop it. But if you could have a chance to talk to that person, right now, this is the darkest timeline. Hopefully, the world is starting to start up again, but it's a frightening time. It's a lonely time. A lot of people are still isolated or we might be getting the slightest hints of connection with each other again. And even going into the holidays. The holidays are a tough time for a lot of people. So if you could offer a word of encouragement to somebody who maybe is feeling like they don't belong or a little by themselves or starting to feel a little hopeless, I want to give you the remainder of the time we have to maybe say something to that person.
Oh, I thank you. I appreciate that. As concisely as I can express that there is always on the periphery of the darkest moments for yourself, good people and light to be found. When times are at their worst, when you feel the most lonely, when you feel the most lost, when you feel that cold shadow surrounding you, do your best, because it's all you can do, to remind yourself that beyond the edge of that shadow, there are people and there are places and there are experiences that are wanting to pull you out of it. Some people may reach for you, but it's you that has to find the strength to take the step, to take the hand, to try and make the bolder, scarier choice of stepping out of that coldness. And it may not be easy too. Sometimes the path itself is fraught with bumps and negativity and naysayers and, toxic elements of humanity. But I've been in those dark moments. I've had very, very challenging times in my life in the past, even recent past. And reminding myself of the good that's out there, reminding myself of the communities and the people and the friends that either we have or the friends that we've yet to make, are there as long as you can find the strength to take a step and then take another step and then take a third step. You don't have to make a big journey, just enough energy to take a step and then keep taking those steps until eventually the shadow begins to fade. And maybe you'll bump into somebody that's looking for connection as well, or is in a better place and can lift you up into theirs. That's my esoteric answer.
No, it's a brilliant one. One of my all-time favorite quotes is from Rainier Maria Rilke, which is be patient and tough. Someday this pain will be useful to you. Just like you said, keep moving forward. The storm will pass. I guarantee it. I promise you. Just keep moving. The storm will pass. I don't know. Somebody out there needed to hear that. I felt compelled to share that with someone.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, appreciate that.
But hey, man, believe it or not, that's our time.
Oh shit! It's so fast.
It goes so fast. Thank you all so much for the questions. Again, I apologize we couldn't get to all of them. I tried to group as many together, at least topically, as I could. Obviously, I feel like people are probably pretty clear on who you are. But you know what? Let me ask you this: are there any non-CR things that you can talk about that you would like to hype here before we go? Any other projects coming up, voice work, anything of the sort?
One thing I could think off the top of my head, it would be the new JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series is starting up on Netflix soon, Stone Ocean, which I returned to voice Jotaro Kujo, who's a character, an anime character who's been dear to my heart since I was a teenager, and then I had the opportunity to voice him, and it's been a fun ride ever since. So if you're a fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is a wild anime, definitely check out the new season. If you haven't, you should watch them anyway because they're wild.
Yeah, that's an apt description. Yeah, so again, I think every single thing we talked about, we could have talked about hours about that one thing, but hopefully you all enjoyed our little chat here, took something from it. More important than anything else is, again, keep moving, and if you're thinking about doing what we do it, because the world needs you.
Hell yeah.
Mr. Mercer, thank you so very much, sir. And for everybody else, we'll be back next week with our guest, Mr. Todd Kenrick, to keep deep diving into all of this stuff. So until next time, thank you all so much, and we'll see you then. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.